If you really want to find out about the real issues of health, then you should go to Wikisana.
Dann sollten Sie auf Wikisana gehen.
Welcome, dear viewers, to our format today, Natural Medicine. A very challenging disease, COPD, which of course presents many patients with various solutions and what we can really use from nature and what advantages can really be drawn out of this bad disease for each patient.
Wirklich nutzen können und welche Vorteile sich da auch wirklich in dieser schlimmen Krankheit für jeden Patienten noch mal rausziehen lassen.
We find out today from the Energy founder, Guido Bierther. Stay tuned. Hello, dear Guido, nice to have you on.
Hello, dear Karina, thank you for having me.
Yes, we had our technical challenges in advance. And I'm glad that everything worked out now and that we're really talking about the topic now. You also said in advance that there have been many interviews on the subject. I have to admit honestly, I haven't done an interview on the topic of COPD myself. That's why I'm also very interested in the history of the disease. What is it anyway? How does it express itself? What are the chances of healing through therapy?
Basically, we've been at QS24 for many years, that we can be there. And there were also some experts who had already reported on it. There were also patients involved and so on. But we're constantly learning about it. And the COPD stands for Chronic Obstructive Pulmonary Disease. And people have all kinds of complaints. The affected, for example, that they have mucousy lungs, that they can't cough that off properly. As a result, of course, they have a lack of energy, sleep irritations, sleep disorders, and so on. Yes, and there are all kinds of reliefs. And with our method, with the spirovitalization, or with the energy method, we have 20 years of experience. And we are happy that we can share some of the experience with you today.
I'm very happy about that. You always follow up with the patients, so to speak, the processes. And that would be exciting to hear from you again. How can I imagine the use of the energy during the disease?
Exactly. So we personally don't follow it, but our therapists do. We are manufacturers of a method that helps. I might say first of all what energy doesn't do. Energy does not increase the oxygen, it does not ionize the oxygen, and it does not lead to ozone or body foreign substances in general. But we have a new development, a first development, a technological one. We have been able to technically recreate a component of photosynthesis. That means the interplay of light, air, and oxygen, where we say this is our most important life and remedy. We bring that into balance, because in nature, at least outside the forest, it is no longer in balance. For example, in cities, and the energy flow or the energy formation is not optimal there. So that can be revitalized. Light, air, and water, we do that with small devices. But we have actually only rebuilt the process of the forest, because nowhere can you breathe better air than in the forest. And obviously in the 20 years there have been very clear signals, practical observations and studies that patients with COPD can simply restore energy, get into balance somewhere, feel better and, above all, be able to sleep better.
How can I imagine the application? So you get a feel for it. Is it like an asthma inhaler?
No, that's a device. It looks like or has the size of a video recorder. Or what do you have today comparable to a video recorder?
For those who still know it.
Or an open daily newspaper or a folded daily newspaper. Yes, this device sucks in room air, activates it according to a prototype of photosynthesis, i.e. with the help of activation units. And the air jumps out of the device, and it is best to breathe it through a respirator, i.e. not a respirator mask, but through a respirator glasses. And actually, as always, the air comes in and comes out of this device. And that for 20 minutes a day, that's the average recommendation. But we also have many COPD-affected people who say, okay, I'll do it in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. Some only do it in the evening. We don't want to specify that, we always say, when it feels good for you.
What are the trigger phenomena in relation to your experience reports with the patients?
Well, first of all, this technology, which has never been developed for COPD-affected people, in the sense that it is also not a medical product, but it is actually a lifestyle device. Although the first 15, 16, 17 years when we were in the market with it, of course, it was also strongly accepted therapeutically. But because we want to reach people, we have decomplicated it a bit and call it forest air generator, and in principle it is a bridge between an air conditioner and a heater. Both are physical therapies, and if we deal with it in detail, we learn that the air conditioner, as well as the heater, go at the expense of the vitality of the atmosphere. Because both times water molecules are removed from the respiratory tract. So what we all underestimate today, we also have to breathe water. It's not just the oxygen that keeps us alive, and we at Energy claim that water has to correspond with oxygen and light, has to cooperate, to simply produce the best effect in the body. Again, energy does not provide any additional oxygen. It does not ionize the oxygen, and ozone is not added at all, but a process of photosynthesis was technologically recognized without any substances, and in principle it is best to breathe in through the respirator glasses every day. Of course, you can also breathe in without the respirator by letting the device run in the room, but it is not as effective. Yes, and the experience has simply shown, although, as I said, we were never prepared for the COPD-affected, but thousands of doctors applied this topic and have given us corresponding feedback. And at some point the patients came to us. They did inhale or revitalize, as we call it. First of all, they had no subjective perception, because it takes a few weeks longer for COPD-affected people. But the result seems to be that parameters have been improved in the practical observations by the school physicians, such as FEV1. This is a parameter that has been improved. I can't say any more about it now, because I'm not a scientist, but I can say something about parameters such as climbing stairs. People who used to have to take a break on the second floor said 2 or 3 months later, wow, I can now walk to the second or third floor without taking a break. Or when they went on a route, they noticed, okay, the air was out of this tree or this bench. They just go on today. So we at Energy do not claim that we can heal COPD. That is a big challenge. We would not claim that, even if it were. But it just promotes the quality of life, the quality of sleep. And if you sleep better, you usually have more energy the next day. And of course that builds up over the weeks. Yes, and the addition that you can cough off better. Because the lungs are not so congested then. Because the lungs are not so congested then, the oxygen can flow better and do what it needs to do.
Are there any additional possibilities to do the whole thing where you say, we always combine that? There we have another effect.
Exactly, over time, the possibility has arisen that you can not only revitalize with energy, but also flavor it. That means we have developed components for these vitalizers. That means a small glass bottle, to be precise. A drop of water on top, you put 3, 4, 5, 6 or 10 drops, depending on how much you want of the vital oil on it. And because the air passes through this bottle, it takes on the aroma. That is, it becomes an aromatherapy. We have had an oil for many years, which has proven itself to thousands of users, a mixture of all kinds of herbs. To put it briefly, I cannot tell you what's in there exactly, but it supports the effect.
Aber es unterstützt die Wirkung, dass die Menschen sich nicht nur vitalisiert fühlen, sondern auch im wahrsten Sinne des Wortes aromatisiert. Und wer
And
sich
who
mit
has dealt with
Aromatherapie
aromatherapy so
auskennt,
far, he also knows that there is a nice feeling of well-being in addition to aromas.
zusätzlich bei rumkommt. Und
So
aus
both
unserer
together
Erfahrung
support the whole
unterstützt es
thing.
dazu noch viel mehr.
Yes, that's quite funny. I also had an interview today with an aromatherapist, a healing practitioner. And I was totally fascinated that if you really take the purest aromas, which can have incredible effects, both in the psyche and in the body, especially in the lungs, she also told, peppermint seems to be a very important factor.
Angesteuert werden kann, sowohl in der Psyche als auch im Körper. Gerade auch Lunge, hat sie auch erzählt. Pfefferminz scheint da wohl ein ganz wichtiger Faktor zu sein.
So it's really interesting that there is such an interface today, because, as I said, aromatherapy is not on the agenda.
But proven for thousands or hundreds of years, you know that, I think, among other things, you also talk about what we can't all perceive in the forest, the terpenes. These are the substances in the forest. So it's not just that you can smell it, but there are also other, I would say, accesses that have an effect on us humans. Who deals with the forest, what we did with energy, of course, knows that this is a miracle. You can smell it in the forest and so on. So that's a great thing. We were able to recreate, of course, you can't recreate the ambience of a forest in an energy device, but it is still offered in so-called forest grottos. There are the salt grottos, you know that, and the salt grottos that are a bit more innovative are now also called forest grottos due to an energy generator being installed in addition. Because we know that in the salt grottos there are also many people with COPD to get back to the core issue. And they get very good help there. But the combination is even better. That means salt, aroma, and energy helps these people very much.
Great. What are the highlights of your experience reports? Were there any individual reports where you say, oh, that really touched me, or I found it almost fantastic?
Energy concentrates on COPD, but not exclusively, but there are completely different pictures of the disease where we were always surprised again. Because we never considered it as a cure or anything else or brought it into the market. But obviously it is so that all kinds of processes are pushed into the body that just work better. I don't want to say it too loud, as they say so nicely, because we have to comply with the medicine's advertising law. But there are already statements from doctors and from the affected who were both surprised and would never have attributed energy to what happened there. But we can say from other areas, for example, macular degeneration. I don't know if you've heard that before, but that's an eye disease which there are 10% of all people over 65 infected in Germany. So that's not funny at all. You lose your eyesight. We had an 82-year-old lady, Ms. Linnartz. She learned about it from her ophthalmologist. Long story short, 2 years later she had 2 own devices, and at the age of 84 the lady bought herself a new car. That's all on the internet, that's authentic. There was even a camera crew there. So I've experienced some really great things or been able to experience human experiences. COPD is just a disease that we generally don't deal with at Energy, because we don't have a medical product. But of course the affected are often contradicted by a long path of suffering. Of course, they have been informed very medically and very few who follow a naturopathic approach, and there are very, very good studies that show that the pharmaceutical products have the effect of creating the lung bubbles, the so-called alveoli.
dass die Lungenbläschen groß stellen, also die sogenannten Alveolen.
And through our vegetative
Das
nervous system,
Nervensystem,
i.e. through sympathicus, parasympatheticus, they can be made large and small.
klein gestellt werden.
You can imagine an alveoli like an air balloon that is filled with water. If there is a lot of water in there, we have a big surface. If there is little amounts of water in there, a small one. If we are relaxed, then we have less area. This also means that the alveoli don't have as much attack area for the oxygen that can go into the blood via the alveoli. And the COPD drugs, as we have experienced, artificially stimulate the body so that we are constantly under stress. That is, when we are under stress, the lungs are made large. But of course that also has other consequences. In stress, we cannot regenerate or repair. That's why we have to come back to the parasympatheticus, i.e. the relaxation area or the relaxation nerve. And with the drugs, as we heard it, we can't underline it in that sense, but it seems to be difficult to get into a state of relaxation. And of course that burns off the affected person endlessly. So that's why I think we have a very gentle method. What's more important than the air we breathe? That's what we at Energy don't get for years. Why it is managed so Spartan? Who knows that we breathe in and out 12,000 liters a day on average? That means you and we all breathe 12,000 liters, then we haven't run a marathon or anything else. So that means we breathe over 20,000 times a day. Based on what we breathe, where we say that's much more than air, that's an air atmosphere or a breathing atmosphere, there is 21% oxygen in there, we not that, that's the case almost worldwide. 78% nitrogen, 1% noble gases. So if we break up the noble gases in quotation marks, there are all kinds of aspects in there that are very, very relevant to us. What we have heard very, very often in recent years, what has had massive consequences is the increased CO2 production or share. But how much is in there? 0.04% worldwide. That hasn't changed much over the last 3 years where we had the lockdown and all kinds of reductions in air traffic and so on. So a second parameter where we pay a lot of attention at Energy is humidity. That means the water content. Who knows that we take about 150 to 200 milliliters of water per day through breathing? And this water is also relevant because water is not the same. You have had many interviews with Dr. Klinghardt. You know Professor Gerald Pollack. He has found the so-called IZ water again, so to speak. A state of the water that is simply much more reactive, in quotation marks, is more energetic. I don't want to go into too much detail now, but it's all in the air in which we breathe. So we have to be aware of that and just make sure that this energy in it plays together so that it can produce most of the energy when inhaling. That is simply something that Energy supports.
Super interesting. If you want to get a little smarter now, read into all this technology or yes. Are there any possibilities?
In diese ganze Technologie oder ja, gibt's da Möglichkeiten?
Ja, jede Menge, beispielsweise bei YouTube. Erstmal bei euch auf dem Kanal, da gibt es,
Yes,
glaube ich, 8
there
oder
are,
10
I
Videos
think,
von
8 or 10
betroffenen
videos of people affected by
Patienten,
COPD who have given their experience or passed it on.
oder
So if you go to
weitergegeben
COPD and Energy on YouTube or the internet, you will find thousands of information.
Im Internet, da findet man tausende Informationen,
Clearly.
ganz klar. Aber
But
wie
as I
gesagt, wir
said,
haben
we
uns
have
jetzt
not
nicht
gone into the COPD
fest auf
diagnosis,
die
but in general energy is an energy
COPD
therapy. It affects cognitive nervous system. The highest rule and control center is supported.
Die greift also systemisch, das heißt, das vegetative Nervensystem, die oberste Regel- und Steuerzentrale wird unterstützt.
And that not only affects those affected by COPD, but also with asthma, with Parkinson's, with Alzheimer's, with all kinds of other topics. So there is a lot on the internet. But if you want to learn something about the air or want to recognize it again, you can enter the little Atmos on the internet with the brochure that I have here.
Kann mal der kleine Atmos im Internet eingeben oder ich würde euch gerne die Broschüre, die habe ich hier auch liegen.
What keeps you alive?
Sie am Leben.
Recommend. It just shows what air is. What do we use it for? Why does the whale use 90% of the oxygen? Why do we only use 4% of the 21% that we breathe in? That means we don't need more oxygen, but we have to help the body to use the oxygen in the air better, because a healthy young human being exhales 75% of the oxygen unused. Why do you need more oxygen then? By the way, that's the reason why you can save lives by mouth-to-mouth breathing. If you use all the oxygen, it won't make much sense. So that's why it's a huge, exciting topic, and I can only tell everyone to inform yourself about the air you breathe. There are people able to talk about wine for hours. But when it comes to air, no one knows about it. Hardly anyone knows about it, and you have to think about it. Why is that? We breathe in 12,000 liters every day. We hear from the doctors from morning to evening that they should drink enough and all sorts of things. But what are 2, 3, 4 liters of water in relation to 12,000 liters of air volume? And of these 12,000 liters, about 2,000 liters are oxygen content. And of this oxygen content, we only use 400, 500 liters and breathe 75% out again. You have to make that clear. An energy simply supports the usability of oxygen and prepares the oxygen or the atmosphere, not the oxygen at all, so that the body can do good things, as it used to be many thousands of years ago. Because a few thousand years ago there was so much more CO2 production or CO2 share. And you have to ask yourself why there is a CO2 generator in every greenhouse. We are not so angry with CO2. We believe it makes sense. But yes, the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Exactly. That's always a bit like this. I always say, knowledge is not a bribe, it is also a hollow guilt. You can also do some research. It's always exciting.
Exactly. Good air is nothing. And it also makes it clear, to bring it back to the point, we can't eat for 3 weeks, we'll survive that by necessity. Absolutely by necessity. We can't drink anything for a few days, we'll survive that too. But not breathing for 3, 4, 5 minutes, then we have a problem forever.
Great. Thank you, Guido. It's always nice to look again. Where else can I use it? If you have time, also the topic of detoxification, I would be interested, because you can detoxify so efficiently in the forest, that we may take up the topic again.
With pleasure. I always say, without air, everything is nothing. And who deals with it, whether they are athletes, whether they are managers, we have uses in Formula 1, in biathlon, as you said, really research in depth. And that may be the most meaningful thing you can do for health. Because in Asian countries more than 500 studies have been published, which are based on the so-called forest bathing. And they say quite clearly, in the affected, 50% of the problems were after a period of time X, just because they breathed good air. I'm not allowed to confirm that, but in the 22 years where we have brought energy into the market, these are really crazy things. And where we ourselves said, you can't link that to the air. But trying goes over studying. We have 1,000 publications on it. The whole thing can also be presented scientifically credible. We received a science award from the International Prevention Organization. So the whole thing is more than well substantiated. And that's why we say today, trying goes over studying, because no one understands it fully anyways. We always want to. But that's not always possible.
Super. Yes, exciting topic. Also again in combination with the aromas. That the fragrances or the aromas are really also the communication of the trees. And every aroma has a different ability, also in the repair and so on. I'm also completely fascinated. And we're actually going through a great conversation. Yes, a nice conversation. A nice forest conversation.
But detoxification is of course also another topic. You wanted to talk about it separately with us. But who knows that 70% is detoxified via the lungs, 7% via the bladder, 3% via the intestine, and 20% via the skin?
Yes.
That means lungs and skin are somewhere relevant for energy. And that's something that you can see at some point. If you breathe good air, that also becomes noticeable at some point.
Super. Yes, we'll do that as our own topic again. Thank you, Guido, and hopefully see you again soon.
See you then. All the best.
Thank you, you too. Bye. Yes, dear viewers, again a bit of motivation to go to the forest, but also to integrate the benefits of good air in our daily lives. Thank you very much. Bye.